If you look at a map of the British Isles, there's a weird little island in the middle that should be part of Britain. It sits between England and Ireland, the people speak English, and they spend the pound. But the Isle of Man is not in the UK. It's not even in the European Union. It's a geographic ghost of sorts, and that unique status has allowed it to create some of the most fascinating and dangerous laws in the world. I'm Geoff, and this is the geographic story behind the bizarre Isle of Man. The first thing you need to know is that the Isle of Man is small compared to its neighbors, covering only about 574 square kilometers. To put that in perspective, it's roughly 3 times the size of Washington, D.C., the tiny little half square that makes up the capital of the United States. And it sits roughly 50 kilometers from the closest coastline of its neighbors. But here's where the geography gets interesting and perhaps a little suspicious. The island is situated so perfectly in the middle of the Northern Irish Sea that on a clear day, from the island's highest point, you're treated to a view that exists nowhere else on Earth. That highest point is Snaefell, standing at 620 meters. Now, there's an old Manx saying that from the summit of Snaefell is the one place on Earth that you can see 7 kingdoms. The Kingdom of England, the Kingdom of Scotland, the Kingdom of Wales, the Kingdom of Ireland, the Kingdom of Man, the island itself, the Kingdom of Heaven, and the Kingdom of the Sea. While the Kingdom of Heaven might be a matter of faith, the geography backs up the rest. This central position has defined the island's entire existence. Being an island in the center of the Irish Sea didn't mean they were isolated. In fact, quite the contrary. The island was more often in the way of everything than it was left alone. But why is there an island here in the first place? Geologically, the Isle of Man is a survivor. It's composed largely of sedimentary rock, specifically Manx slate, which formed roughly 480 million years ago. This gives the island its rugged, craggy appearance, particularly along the coastlines. And unlike the rolling chalk downs of southern England or the flat peat bogs of the Irish Midlands, the Isle of Man feels like a chunk of the Scottish Highlands that broke off and drifted south. It's dominated by a central spine of hills that cuts the island almost in half, separating the north from the south. This central valley is more than just scenery. Historically, it divided the island culturally and linguistically, creating a north side and a south side that still holds subtle rivalries to this day. The northern plain of the island is different entirely. It's flat and formed from glacial till, debris left behind by the massive ice sheets that retreated at the end of the last ice age. This gives the Isle of Man a best of both worlds physical profile. Dramatic, cliff-lined coasts and mountains in the south and center, transitioning to flat, fertile, and sandy terrain in the north. But the Isle of Man's geography can't be separated from its neighbors. So, how does it compare to the rest of the British Isles? Visually, if you were dropped onto the Isle of Man without a map, you might forgive yourself for thinking that you were in the Lake District of England, or perhaps County Wicklow of Ireland. It shares that lush, emerald green palette, fed by the frequent rains sweeping in from the Atlantic. It has the dry stone walls, the wandering sheep, and the mist-shrouded peaks that characterize the broader British Isles. However, the scale creates a unique atmosphere. Because the island is only about 52 kilometers long and 22 kilometers wide, the transition from mountain to sea is abrupt. In the UK, you can drive for hours through inland terrain. On the Isle of Man, the ocean is a constant presence. You are never more than a few miles from the salt spray. This isolation has also created a unique biological laboratory. The separation from Britain and Ireland happened roughly 8,500 years ago as sea levels rose. This severed land bridge meant that many species common on the mainland never made it to man. There are no voles, no badgers, and no squirrels native to the island. Instead, the island developed its own quirks. You've probably heard of the Manx cat, famous for having no tail. This genetic mutation thrived here specifically because of the island's geographic isolation. A confined gene pool allowed a recessive trait to become a national icon. But it's the coastline of the Isle of Man that is perhaps its most defining geographic feature. It's treacherous. The Irish Sea is notorious for its rough waters, and the currents around the Isle of Man are complex and fast. The Calf of Man, a small islet off the southwestern tip, is separated by a narrow stretch of water called the Sound, where tidal currents can reach speeds that would easily wreck a ship captained by anyone but an expert. This natural moat has been the island's greatest defense. While England and Ireland were easier to invade simply due to their size, offering many landing points, the Isle of Man is a natural fortress. Its cliffs are high, its beaches are often rocky, and the weather is unpredictable. This geography didn't just shape the landscape, it shaped the mindset of the people. Living here means you are constantly aware of the boundaries. You can see the lights of Scotland and England at night, a reminder of the massive economies next door. Yet the dark water in between keeps you apart. It creates a sense of being near the action, but not of it. But being a fortress in the middle of a busy sea has a downside. If you're strong enough to hold it, you control the Irish Sea. But if you aren't, you become the perfect base for pirates, smugglers, and Vikings. If you want to hold a fortress, your defenses have to stay steady and consistent. And honestly, in my own life, as my schedule shifts and we head into the busy spring travel season, staying consistent is my biggest challenge. But I have found a way to support my body's natural defenses and keep my daily routine strong thanks to AG1. I drink AG1 first thing every morning. Coming out of that winter slump, I wanted to reset for the season ahead. And kickstarting my day with one simple scoop makes a meaningful difference in how I feel. If you haven't tried it, AG1 Next Gen is a daily health drink that is clinically shown to fill common nutrient gaps. With over 75 ingredients, including 5 probiotic strains, it essentially replaces the need for a multivitamin, probiotics, and more. Even when I try to eat well, I know that I'm missing things. AG1 replenishes commonly underconsumed daily micronutrients. Plus, it delivers clinically studied probiotics that have been shown to play a role in supporting digestion, alleviating occasional bloating, and supporting a healthy immune system. The superfoods and B vitamins in there also provide daily nutritional support to help me stay steady and consistent as I move through the spring. And when I am traveling and taking a break from my usual routine, I just bring their travel packs with me so I don't fall off track. So prioritize your health this season. Go to drinkag1.com/Geoff or scan the QR code to get an AG1 flavor sampler and a bottle of vitamin D3 K2 free in your welcome kit with your first AG1 subscription. Thanks to AG1 for sponsoring today's video. AG1 provides the steady support you need to stay on your feet no matter what your schedule throws at you. And historically, landing on your feet no matter what is thrown at you is the literal defining trait of the Isle of Man. If you wander the streets of Douglas or Peel today, you're gonna see a symbol everywhere. On the flag, on the government buildings, even on the money. It's the triskelion, 3 armored legs, joined at the thigh, spinning in a circle. The island's motto accompanies it: whichever way you throw me, I shall stand. It's a motto of resilience, and when you look at the history of the island, you realize that they didn't just choose that motto because it sounded cool. They earned it, because the Isle of Man has been thrown around by empires for 2,000 years, yet it always managed to land on its feet. Originally, the Isle of Man was thoroughly Celtic. After the ice melted and the people returned, the culture that developed here was closely linked to Ireland. The Manx language, which is still spoken today and making a comeback, is a Gaelic language. If you speak Irish Gaelic or Scottish Gaelic, you can probably pick up a few words of Manx. Legend says the island got its name from a Celtic sea god who would cloak the island in mist to hide it from invaders. And for a long time, that mist seemed to work. While the Romans conquered most of Britain, they never bothered with the Isle of Man. They knew it was there, but they left it alone. This allowed the island to become a haven, until it wasn't. Around the 8th century, the sea stopped being a barrier and started being a highway again. The Vikings arrived. But unlike in some parts of England, where they raided and left, or other parts where they were eventually driven out, here the Vikings looked at the Isle of Man and saw strategic perfection. By 1079, a Viking warlord named Godred Crovan, known in local legend as King Ori, conquered the island. But he didn't just annex it to Norway or Denmark, he created something new, the Kingdom of the Isles. This was a maritime empire that controlled the Isle of Man and the Hebrides Islands off the west coast of Scotland. For centuries, the King of Man was a serious player in European politics, commanding a fleet of galleys that controlled the Irish Sea. It was during this Viking era that the island developed its most defining feature. While England was experimenting with the Magna Carta, the Manx Vikings had already established a parliament in the Tinwald, the oldest continuous parliament in the world. Founded over 1,000 years ago, it wasn't a gathering of nobles in a closed room. It was an open-air assembly where laws were read aloud to the people on a hill. And here's the crazy part. They still do this. Every year on July 5th, the laws of the island are read aloud on Tinwald Hill. If they aren't read, they aren't laws. This continuity is key. When the Isle of Man eventually changed hands, they didn't dissolve Tinwald. they kept it. By the mid-13th century, the Viking grip on the region was slipping. The Kingdom of Scotland and the Kingdom of England were rising, and they both wanted the rock in the middle of the sea. For about 100 years, the Isle of Man was a political football. The Scots took it in 1266, the English took it back in 1290. The Scots took it again in 1313 under Robert the Bruce himself, and then the English took it back again. Finally, in the 1300s, England secured control. But the English king didn't make the Isle of Man part of England. He didn't turn it into a county like Yorkshire or Kent. Instead, the English king granted the island to a loyal family, the Stanleys, and gave them the title King of Man, later downgraded to Lord of Man. The Stanleys ruled the island as their own private fiefdom for over 300 years. They paid a symbolic tribute to the King of England, usually a pair of falcons during coronation, but otherwise they made their own laws, collected their own taxes, and minted their own coins. The Isle of Man was essentially a private country owned by a rich English family. This arrangement worked great for the Stanleys, but by the 1700s, it was becoming a massive headache for the British Crown. Because the Isle of Man was not part of the UK, it had different tax laws. This turned the island into the smuggling capital of Europe. Merchants would ship brandy, tea, and tobacco into the Isle of Man, pay the low Manx tax, and then secretly smuggle the goods into England and Scotland under the cover of darkness, bypassing the high British customs duties. The British government was losing millions in revenue, but they couldn't just invade, because technically, the Stanleys owned the place legally as part of a deal with the King of England. So, in 1765, the British government did the only thing they could do. They bought it. This event is known as the Revestment Act. The British Crown paid the Duke of Atholl, the heir of the Stanleys, £70,000 to buy his rights as the Lord of Man. This is the moment where the Isle of Man should have become part of the UK. It would have been so easy to just absorb it into the growing British Empire. But once again, they did not do that. Whether through bureaucratic laziness, legal complexity, or just a respect for the ancient Tinwald, the Crown simply took over the title of Lord of Man. They didn't merge the governments. King Charles is not the king of the Isle of Man, but oddly enough, he is the Lord of Man. This distinction seems tiny, but it's the reason why today, the Isle of Man is a crown dependency and not part of the United Kingdom. It's a possession of the crown, not part of the state. But why does the UK, in 2026, allow this wealthy, unregulated neighbor to sit right on its doorstep? And what exactly are the laws that make the Isle of Man a libertarian dream and a bureaucratic nightmare all at once? If you were to fly into the Isle of Man today and pull out your passport, you might notice something confusing. If you're a British citizen, your passport says United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. But if you're born on the Isle of Man, your passport looks almost identical, except for one crucial detail. It doesn't say United Kingdom. It says British Islands, Isle of Man. This tiny textual difference reveals the massive invisible wall that sits between the island and the rest of the world. So, if the Isle of Man is a crown dependency, then why doesn't the UK just own this place outright? And how does a small rocky island in the Irish Sea get away with having no national speed limit, legalized online gambling empires, and a government that operates more like a private club than a modern democracy? The answer lies in a quirk of British constitutional law that is nearly impossible to explain without a flowchart. So let's do this. The United Kingdom is a sovereign state. The Isle of Man is not part of that state. It's a crown dependency. Here's the distinction. The crown and the government are not the same thing. The Isle of Man belongs to the monarchy, specifically to King Charles III in his capacity as the Lord of Man. It does not belong to the UK Parliament in Westminster. This means that while the UK is responsible for the island's defense and foreign affairs, because the Isle of Man doesn't have an army or embassies, the UK Parliament technically has no right to legislate for the island on domestic matters. They can't tell the Manx people how to tax their citizens, how to run their schools, or how fast they can drive their cars. The island essentially exists in a legal gray zone, a bubble of sovereignty protected by British aircraft carriers, but unregulated by British bureaucrats. And inside that bubble, things have gotten kind of weird. The most famous example of this legal independence is the Isle of Man TT. Every year, for 2 weeks, the island shuts down its public roads and turns them into the deadliest racetrack on Earth. Motorbikes scream through sleepy villages at over 100 miles per hour, inches from stone walls and spectators' front yards. Since the race began in 1907, there have been over 260 deaths. In the United Kingdom, or almost anywhere else in the developed world, a race this dangerous would be banned immediately by health and safety regulators. But because the Isle of Man makes its own laws, they say, no, we like it. In fact, outside of the towns, the Isle of Man has no national speed limit. You can legally drive your car as fast as it can physically go on mountain roads. It's one of the few places in the world without a speed limit on public highways. But the Wild West attitude here applies to more than just cars. If you look at the town of Douglas, the capital, you won't see a tiny hamlet of a capital for a small island country. You'll see someplace surprisingly modern and very wealthy. Because Tinvald controls the tax code, they've made a deliberate choice to go where the UK can't. The Isle of Man has a top income tax rate of just 22%. There's no capital gains tax, there's no inheritance tax. And for most companies, the corporate tax rate is a flat 0%. This has made the island a magnet for industries that require, let's say, flexible regulation. For years, it was banking and insurance. Today, it's internet gambling. If you've ever played online poker or placed a sports bet online, there's a very good chance that the digital infrastructure hosting that game is sitting on a server rack in Douglas. The Isle of Man legalized and regulated online gambling long before most other countries knew what it was, turning this small island into a global hub for the industry. But this leads us to our final question. Who actually lives on the Isle of Man? While the official population hovers around 84,000 people, only about half of them were born on the island, and the other half are what locals call stopovers. People who moved there for the jobs, the tax breaks, or the relatively quiet life, the Isle of Man TT aside. This creates a strange demographic mix. You have billionaire tax exiles living in gated mansions, working class families whose lineage goes back to the Vikings, and tech workers from all over the world maintaining the servers for those global gambling sites. Governance is intimate. In a population this small, national politicians are neighbors. There are no political parties in the traditional sense. Almost all politicians run as independents. This means the government is less about ideology and more about fixing the potholes and keeping the ferry running. But it's not all tax-free paradise. The cost of living is staggeringly high because almost everything has to be imported by sea. Housing is expensive, and for young people, island fever is real. You can drive from one end of the country to the other in an hour. If you want to see a concert, go to a specialist doctor, or shop at a major chain store, you often have to get on a boat or a plane to Dublin, Belfast, or even London. So the Isle of Man is a geographic and political fossil. It's a remnant of a time when Europe was made up of hundreds of tiny principalities and duchies before they were all swallowed up by the great nation states like France, Germany, and of course the United Kingdom. But through a combination of luck, stubbornness, and rough seas, the Isle of Man has avoided being swallowed. This week, I'm in Guatemala, where I'll explore why the country has had not one, not two, not three, but 4 separate capitals. It's a fascinating story in why Spanish colonizers were so bad at picking locations. So come join me over on my travel channel. I hope you enjoyed learning all about the Isle of Man. If you did, be sure to check out this video all about the Falkland Islands, another weird kind of sort of British territory. Thanks for watching. See you next time.